Inside a small, chilly hospital room, a quiet sob escaped from Kyle as he sat by the edge of his mother's bed. His small hands clutched hers tightly. Venus hadn't woken up since the accident. "Mom, please wake up. I need you," he whispered, his voice trembling as he tried to hold back his sobs. No answer came. Only the soft rhythm of machines and the faint sound of her breathing filled the room. Wiping his tears, Kyle knew he shouldn't cry, but the pain was too strong to hold in. A knock on the door startled him. He turned to see Mrs. Nora, the elderly landlady of the apartment they rented. "Kyle, sweetheart, have you eaten?" she asked, concern etched on her face. Kyle shook his head. "Why don't you come with me? I'll get you some bread," she offered gently. He shook his head again. "I'd rather stay here, Mrs. Nora. I don't want to be alone at home. And I don't want to leave Mom alone either," he said sadly. Mrs. Nora sighed but didn't push further. "Kyle, honey, what are you and your mom going to do now? Has no help come yet? I'm so sorry I can't do more." Her voice trembled with concern. Kyle fell silent. He recalled the nurses talking about the hospital bill earlier. They hadn't paid their rent, and now there were hospital bills piling up. He had to do something. "Mrs. Nora, do you know where I can earn some money?" Kyle asked boldly. "Oh, child, you're too young to be working," she replied with a frown. "I can do it. I will." "For Mum," Kyle said, wiping his cheek. The old woman paused, then suddenly remembered. "I heard there's an audition at a big music studio. They're holding a contest for young singers." Kyle's eyes widened. "Singers?" "Yes, and the prize is big. Even if you don't win, you'll still get something. It's worth a try, isn't it? And I've heard you sing. You have a lovely voice, honey," she said with admiration. Kyle blushed at the praise. He knew it wasn't just a regular audition, but he had no choice. He had to try. "Mum, I'm going to the music studio, okay? I'm going to find a way," he whispered, still holding her hand. Turning back to Mrs. Nora, he nodded. "I'll try. Thank you so much." The next day, Kyle stood in front of the towering building of Harper Music Studios. He swallowed hard at the size of the place. Children were everywhere, cameras flashing, and celebrities walking around. It was overwhelming, but he couldn't back down. He approached the registration booth nervously. "Ma'am, I'd like to join the audition," Kyle said. "How old are you?" the woman behind the table asked, eyeing him. "6, he answered politely. The staff exchanged glances, clearly unsure. "Are you with someone?" she asked. Kyle shook his head. "I came alone. My mom's in the hospital. That's why I'm here." The woman noticed his faded clothes and worn-out shoes. A hint of sympathy crossed her face. She offered him a kind smile. "What's your name?" she asked. "Kyle Anderson," he replied. The woman froze. So did the rest of the staff. Kyle noticed the strange reaction. "Is there a problem?" he asked, puzzled. No problem. We were just surprised by your last name, that's all. Here, fill this out," she said quickly, handing him a form. With the help of a kind staff member, Kyle completed the audition form and joined the line. Hours passed until finally it was his turn. He stepped into the audition room where 3 judges and the studio owner, Zane Anderson, were seated. Kyle's eyes grew wide. "That's my idol, Zane," he whispered in awe. Zane looked at the boy. So young, he thought. Too young for this competition, yet there was something familiar about the kid. He checked the form again. "Kyle Anderson, is that really your name, son?" he asked, stunned. "Yes, sir," Kyle replied brightly. Zane swallowed hard. A strange feeling surged through him. Something connected him to this boy. Aside from the matching surname. "Okay, Kyle, you may begin." Kyle took a deep breath and smiled, then began to sing. No background music, just his pure voice. Everyone in the room was stunned. Zane's eyes widened as the song struck him. The lyrics. They weren't just any lyrics. They were familiar. Too familiar. He hadn't heard that song in years. It was a private song, a song only Venus knew. It hit Zane like a wave. Memories flooded in. That small, cozy condo. A quiet night. Homemade dinner. A tiny birthday cake. Venus, in a simple dress, handed him utensils. "Happy birthday, Zane," she said, smiling. "You didn't have to do this," he had said. "Of course I did. It's your birthday. I should be the one treating you," she replied. After dinner, she picked up her guitar. "I wrote a song for you. I hope you like it." As she strummed the opening chords, she sang, "In every moment of my life, you're the light of my heart." Zane hadn't realized it then, but that song would live in his heart forever. Back in the present, Zane stared at Kyle. How does this boy know that song? He hadn't released it. No one had heard it, not even his fans. Only Venus. Could it be? Zane's heart raced. Is he my son? Kyle's song ended, and the judges erupted into applause, impressed beyond words. "That kid's incredible. Who needs background music with a voice like that?" one judge exclaimed. "You've got an amazing voice, son," another added. Kyle looked at Zane, awaiting the opinion of his idol. But Zane was silent. He had to steady himself, be sure. "You impressed me, kid," Zane finally said, his words simple but loaded with meaning. Kyle beamed. The next day, the list of selected contestants was posted. Children gathered around the bulletin board, and Kyle was in disbelief when he saw his name, number 1. "I made it," he whispered joyfully, but he noticed some of the other kids looking at him strangely. He wasn't sure why, but a few looked at him with something close to resentment. He shrugged it off and returned to rehearsing. Now that he was in, he had to make it to the semi-finals after the first week. Slowly, Kyle began to notice the whispers, the glances. At first, he ignored them, but it became clear. Wherever he went, murmurs followed. One day, standing by the studio door, 3 older boys approached him. "Hey, are you the new kid?" one asked, nudging his friend. "Yeah," Kyle replied quietly. The 3 exchanged smirks. "I heard you're getting special treatment." "Huh? What are you talking about?" Kyle asked. "Why do you have a bodyguard? And why'd Mr. Anderson recommend you?" Another boy chimed in. Kyle lowered his head. He had no idea what they were talking about, but he could tell one thing. They didn't like him, even if he sang well. "What's so special about you anyway? Look at your clothes. You don't belong here," sneered the tallest boy. Kyle glanced at his outfit. Old, yes, but clean. "There's nothing wrong with being poor," he said quietly but firmly. The boys laughed. "Sure, but poor kids shouldn't squeeze into the world of the rich," one snapped. Kyle clenched his fists. "At least I'm working hard for my mum. What's your excuse for being bullies?" he shot back. The boys were stunned for a moment, but the tallest one grew angrier. "So you're tough now, huh?" he said, shoving Kyle hard enough to make him stumble back. Before Kyle could react, a firm voice echoed through the room. "What's going on here?" Everyone turned. The 3 boys froze when they saw Zane Anderson. He walked straight to Kyle and gently helped him up, then turned to the others with a stern expression. "What did you do? Isn't it in the contest rules that bullying is not allowed?" Zane asked coldly. "We're sorry," the boys mumbled, heads down. "There's never a good reason to bully anyone. If you have a problem, talk it out. Don't mistreat others. Is that clear?" The boys nodded nervously. "I'll give you one chance. Don't let this happen again," Zane said. "Yes, sir," they replied, hurrying away. Kyle hadn't expected his idol to defend him. Zane turned back to the group. In this contest, your background doesn't matter. What matters is your talent and effort. Don't give me a reason to think you don't belong here, he said, looking directly at the boys who had bullied Kyle. They nodded again and quickly left. Zane and Kyle were left alone in the hallway. They looked at each other in silence. Inside, Zane felt a pull, an urge to embrace the boy. But not yet. He needed to be sure. After the incident, Zane brought Kyle to his office. It was a spacious room with walls lined with plaques, albums, and awards. As Zane sorted through paperwork, Kyle couldn't help but look around in awe. He was amazed by the number of awards his idol had earned. Finally, after a few moments of silence, Kyle couldn't hold back his admiration. "Mr. Anderson?" Kyle said. Zane turned and smiled. "Do you have a question, Kyle?" "You're my idol. My mom and I always watch your performances together. She says you're one of the best singers ever," Kyle said enthusiastically. "Thank you, Kyle. That means a lot," Zane replied, his heart warming even as a shadow passed over his eyes. Kyle's smile faded slightly as he remembered his mom in the hospital. "She taught me how to sing. She said I should learn from you." Zane felt a chill in his spine. Slowly, answers were forming in his mind. "I have a question too, Kyle. What's your mom's name?" Zane asked carefully. "Her name is Venus," Kyle replied with a bright expression. Zane went pale. He felt his knees weaken. It was like a splash of cold water. What did you say?" he stammered, barely audible. "My mum's name is Venus," Kyle repeated, now confused by the expression on Zane's face. Zane stared at the boy. His eyes, his face, the way he spoke, and it hit him. A truth he never imagined. "How is this possible?" he whispered. His hands trembled. "Mr. Anderson, why are you crying?" Kyle asked. Zane hadn't realized tears were falling down his cheeks. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped forward, gently placing his hands on Kyle's shoulders. He studied the boy's face closely. There was no mistake. Kyle was his son, the child he and Venus had once created together. The signs were clear: his last name, his appearance, and most of all, the song only Venus knew. "You're my son, Kyle. You're my son," Zane whispered, barely able to believe it himself. Kyle's eyes widened. He didn't move, just stared. Then he slowly shook his head. "I don't understand. How could I be your son? Do you know my mom?" He bombarded Zane with questions, unable to process what he'd just heard. "Do you believe me, son?" Zane asked desperately. "I didn't know Venus was pregnant. I didn't know I had a son. But now that I do, I can't let you go. If I had known, I would have never let you two suffer." Kyle went quiet. He looked down and muttered, "Why didn't you take us with you? Why did you leave us, Mom and me? If it's true, why now?" His words pierced Zane's heart. The weight of his past decisions came crashing down. He had left for his dreams, and in return, he'd lost the chance to know his own family. Zane pulled Kyle into a hug. "I'm so sorry. Forgive me." He once believed that success would allow him to provide a good life for Venus and their child. He never imagined it would come at the cost of their suffering. Kyle wiped his tears, hesitated, then wrapped his arms around Zane. "Can I call you Dad?" he asked softly. Zane held him tighter. "Yes, son, please do." "Dad, I joined the audition not just because I want to sing. I need to earn money for Mom. She's still in the hospital," Kyle said, voice shaking. Zane froze. He had nearly forgotten Venus was still unconscious. "What happened to your mom?" he asked. "She had an accident. We don't have money. I don't know what to do. I'm scared her condition will get worse," Kyle sobbed. The words hit Zane like a punch. The world around him faded, leaving only Kyle's trembling voice. "No. Venus," he whispered, his hands shaking. "She hasn't woken up in a long time," Kyle added. Zane rose to his feet and held his son's hand. "Take me to her, please. I need to see her." Without hesitation, Kyle nodded. In his heart, he knew. Maybe, just maybe, his father could help his mother. Zane could barely breathe as he stood at the door of Venus's hospital room. Kyle clutched his hand tightly, but Zane's feet felt frozen in place. Just beyond the glass was the woman he had been searching for, yet he wasn't prepared for how she looked, pale, motionless, surrounded by machines. "Venus," he whispered. He stepped inside with Kyle and slowly sat by the edge of the bed. His fingers trembled as he reached for Venus's cold hand. "What happened to you, my love?" he whispered, barely hearing his own voice. He was restless. The Venus he had once known, so full of life and laughter, was now unresponsive. Zane turned to Kyle, who stood quietly beside the bed, gripping the blanket tightly. "Son, what happened to your mom?" Zane asked, pain evident in his voice. "We were walking to the market," Kyle began. "She said she wanted to cook my favorite soup, even if we didn't have much." Zane smiled faintly for a moment, then listened closely. "But a motorcycle sped by," Kyle continued. "The police said the driver was drunk. I didn't see it coming. Mum pushed me out of the way and she got hit." Kyle's voice cracked. "There was so much blood. She didn't move anymore." Zane couldn't take it. He pulled Kyle into a tight embrace, regret flooding every corner of his heart. "I'm sorry I didn't find you sooner. I'm sorry I came too late," Zane whispered, tears falling. He reached again for Venus's hand while holding Kyle close. "If only I hadn't left, if I hadn't been selfish, maybe none of this would have happened." Kyle didn't answer. He just cried into his father's chest. "I love you both so much, Venus," Zane whispered. He closed his eyes, unable to stop the tears. In that moment, he wished he could punish himself for his past. He held them both tighter, terrified of losing them again. For days, Zane stayed at the hospital. Since seeing Venus unconscious, his world had shifted. Each passing day was filled with waiting and caring, not just for Venus, but for Kyle, too. He often found Kyle sitting silently beside his mother, whispering prayers that she'd wake up. One night, as they sat in the room, Zane turned to Kyle. "Son, want me to teach you a new song?" he offered. Kyle looked up. "Can I, Uncle Zane?" he asked, shy but eager. "Uncle, shouldn't it be Dad now?" Zane teased, trying to cheer him up. Kyle blushed slightly, still not fully used to the idea. "Okay, Dad," he whispered. Zane grinned and ruffled his son's hair. "That's better." They continued their lessons. Day by day, father and son grew closer, not just through blood, but through music, the bond that connected them both. A few days later, while they were still waiting for Venus to wake up, Zane brought Kyle to his music studio. "Everyone, I want you to meet someone," Zane said, placing a hand on Kyle's shoulder. "This is Kyle, my son." "What?" one staff member gasped. "Sir, he's your son?" The entire studio froze in surprise. "Yes," Zane said proudly. "He's my son from my former girlfriend, who's now going to be my wife, so from now on, treat him like family." The staff looked at each other, stunned. Some smiled warmly at Kyle, who stood shyly beside Zane. "No wonder he was so good at the audition," one of them said. "He's got his dad's talent." Kyle scratched his head bashfully. "How did you know I was your son?" he asked Zane. Zane paused, then looked at his son. "Because of the song you sang. That song. Your mum wrote it for me." "Really?" Kyle asked, amazed. Zane nodded. "On my birthday, she sang it to me. It was the best gift I ever received. And now, hearing it from you, it felt like God was reminding me of what I had lost and what I must fight for now." Everyone in the room fell silent, moved by the story. "It's true," one staff member whispered. "Fate brought you back together. It found a way for father and son to reunite." Kyle smiled. He had never imagined that a simple audition would lead him to his real father. The hospital room was dim, lit only by a soft bedside lamp. Kyle was asleep in the adjoining room. Zane sat beside Venus, gently stroking the back of her hand. He hadn't slept much. He was afraid to let go, afraid he'd never hear her voice again. But that night, Venus stirred. Zane gasped as her fingers twitched. "Venus!" he called, his voice filled with hope. Her fingers moved again. Slowly, her eyes fluttered open. The world around her was blurry as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Her gaze finally settled on Zane. "Zane," she whispered, her voice hoarse and weak. Zane's face lit up with emotion. He reached out, held her face, and kissed her cheek. "Yes, Venus, it's me. I'm here. Thank God. Thank God you're awake." Their reunion was tearful and silent. Venus looked at him, confused but emotional. "How did you know I was here?" she asked, brushing his cheek with her trembling fingers. Zane squeezed her hand gently. "I'll tell you everything. But for now, I'm not leaving. I won't let you be alone again." Venus cried as she touched his face. "I'm sorry I left you." "No," Zane said quickly. "I'm the one who should be sorry. I left. I caused this. If I had known you were pregnant, I would have never left. I would have stayed." Venus closed her eyes. Despite the pain and the long separation, Zane was finally there, by her side. They were quiet for a moment, savoring each other's presence. Then, suddenly, Venus sat up. "Kyle," she gasped. Zane gently held her shoulder to calm her. "Don't worry, he's in the other room, sleeping peacefully." Tears returned to her eyes, but this time confusion joined them. "How did you find out?" she asked, disoriented. "How did you know we had a child?" Zane's eyes glistened. "How could I not? The song you wrote for me, our song. Kyle sang it at the audition. The moment I heard it, I knew it couldn't be a coincidence. Only you and I knew that song." Venus smiled through her tears, stunned by the strange path fate had taken. "I taught him that song because it was the symbol of our love," she whispered. Zane chuckled softly and squeezed her hand. "I know. And that's why I love you even more every second. There's no one else for me. We're meant for each other." In that moment, though they were in a hospital, the world seemed to stop just for them. Their lips met in a soft, emotional kiss, one filled with longing and love. After a while, Zane sat quietly beside Venus. He couldn't help but ask the question that had haunted him since he found out about Kyle. "Venus, why didn't you tell me you were pregnant back then?" he asked gently. Venus gave him a serious look and sighed, as if reopening an old wound. She wiped the tears from her eyes before speaking. "The last day we saw each other, that was the same day you told me you were leaving for America to chase your dream," she said softly. "I knew how long you'd wanted to study at that music academy. I didn't want to stand in your way." Zane looked away in silence. "It was your dream, Zane. I didn't want you to regret staying because of me," she continued, her voice trembling. "I was scared that if I told you, you'd change your mind, that you'd stay with me instead of going after what you wanted, and I couldn't bear the thought of being the reason you gave up your future." Zane closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. He felt his chest tighten. "Venus, you're the reason I dream at all. I always imagined coming back and providing for you, and for our child. If I had known, I would have stayed. I could have still chased my dream, with you by my side," Zane said, voice low and filled with regret. Venus shook her head, pain evident on her face. "I was afraid your life would get messed up if you didn't follow your dreams. I wanted you to stay, but I couldn't bear to see you give up the things you love," she replied. Zane didn't speak right away. He remembered the night he left Venus, walking away from her under the rain. "When I got home, my parents were furious," Venus said quietly. "They called me a disgrace, a woman tied to a man who might never come back. They made me feel like I had nothing left." Zane's heart broke at her words. He couldn't hold back. He pulled her into a tight hug, full of sorrow and guilt. "That's why I left," Venus whispered. "I gave up everything to protect Kyle, to protect our child." "Venus," Zane whispered, not knowing how to ease her pain. He held her face gently and kissed her deeply. Venus responded, overwhelmed with emotion. Despite all the pain and separation, one thing was clear now. She wouldn't let her family slip away again. The man she loved, the child she raised alone, they were here. Zane gripped her hand tightly. He still couldn't believe her own family had turned their backs on her when she needed them most. "I'll never stop asking for your forgiveness, my love," Zane said. "Even if it takes years for you to truly forgive me, I'll pay for everything I did. Just please, don't keep me away from you and our son." Venus hugged him tighter. "I've already forgiven you, but I want you to earn it. I want to feel your presence. After all these years, I've waited for you to find us." Zane smiled and kissed the back of her hand. "If that's what you want, I'll do it, even if it means you make it hard for me." The next morning, sunlight filled the hospital room. Venus and Zane were already awake despite sleeping late. Zane was feeding Venus when Kyle interrupted them. "Bite, Dad," Kyle said loudly, opening his mouth and pointing at the spoon Zane was holding. Venus shook her head, laughing. "Let me eat properly, please." "It's fine. I like feeding both of you," Zane said with a grin. He took a spoonful of soup and carefully fed Yin. Then he turned to Kyle and did the same. Kyle happily opened his mouth again, wiggling in his seat with joy. Zane noticed Venus staring off into space for a moment, but when their eyes met, she smiled, sweetly, longingly. The room fell into a peaceful silence. The lighting was soft and calm. Kyle was asleep in the adjoining room, and Venus lay in bed, while Zane sat beside her, holding her hand. They stared at each other quietly. "Are you sure you're okay now?" Zane asked, squeezing her hand gently. Venus nodded. "Yes, thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you weren't here." "You should have had me here long ago," Zane said with a smile. Before Venus could respond, her phone vibrated on the bedside table. Zane raised an eyebrow when he saw the caller's name on the screen. It was a man's name. He looked at Venus, waiting for her to explain, but she calmly picked up the phone and answered. "Hello, Hansel." Zane stiffened in his seat. "Hansel, who was that?" The tone of Venus's voice felt light, too familiar. "You don't have to worry, I'm okay now," Venus said on the call. "Someone's taking care of me." Zane's chest tightened. "Someone?" he thought. He gritted his teeth, trying to stay composed, but then he heard the man's voice faintly on the other end, deep and calm. Zane's jealousy flared. He saw Venus smile slightly. "Don't worry, Hansel. Not yet, but I'll be back at the restaurant once I'm better," she said. "Restaurant?" Zane echoed in his mind. That was enough. In a flash, he walked over to Venus and hugged her from behind. "Zane, what are you doing?" Venus exclaimed, but instead of letting go, he tightened his hold, pressing his cheek to her shoulder. "You're taking too long. I want to sleep beside you already," he whispered with a hint of jealousy. Venus froze, feeling the warmth of his body and the quick beat of his heart. On the phone, Hansel's voice asked, "Venus, are you with someone?" Venus smiled and chuckled softly. "Yes, Hansel. All right, let's talk again tomorrow. Good night." She ended the call and turned to the man still clinging to her. Why are you so clingy? She asked playfully, pretending not to know the reason. Zane didn't answer, but he didn't let go either. Venus sighed. You're jealous, aren't you? Zane finally spoke. Seriously? And you knew? Venus laughed and cupped his face, making him look into her eyes. Why do you seem so worried? Do you think I like someone else? Zane looked nervous and his voice cracked. It's just, you seemed really close. Venus shook her head, unsure whether to laugh or feel bad for him. Instead of answering, she suddenly pulled his face closer and kissed him hard on the lips. Zane's eyes widened. Venus! She just smiled. We already have a child, Zane. I never moved on from you, and now you're asking if I like someone else? Zane swallowed hard. You're the only one I want, Zane. No one else. So can you stop being so jealous now? She whispered. Zane's expression softened. He stroked her cheek and kissed her gently again. They held the kiss a while longer before he pulled away. I won't look for anyone else. Ever again, Zane whispered, then hugged her tightly. Days passed, and Zane and Kyle became inseparable. Whether at the hospital or the music studio, Kyle was always at his father's side, cheerful and lively. I'm Dad's assistant, Kyle often boasted to the studio staff, making Zane chuckle. You're not just an assistant anymore, you're already an artist, Zane would say, cradling his son in his arms. It was true. Since Kyle joined the singing contest and stunned everyone with his talent, his name exploded on social media. His audition video went viral, the innocent boy who sang a song tied to his parents' love story. People didn't just admire his voice, they were moved by the story behind it. Numerous talent agencies tried to recruit Kyle, but Zane always declined. We don't need to rush, son. Stay here at my studio. You still have so much to learn from me, Zane explained when Kyle once asked why he couldn't switch management. Kyle nodded. Okay, Dad, I'm happy here anyway, he answered with a smile. Because of Kyle's popularity, Zane's music studio grew even stronger. More singers came in, more projects arrived, and his influence in the industry expanded. At last, the day came when Venus was allowed to leave the hospital. As they walked out, she felt the warmth of Zane's arms guiding her. He held her hand protectively. When they reached the studio, the staff welcomed her. Welcome back, Venus, one employee greeted warmly. Finally, and you're with our boss now, another teased. Venus couldn't help but smile. She never expected such a warm reception from Zane's team. And what surprised her even more was Zane's formal announcement. Everyone, I'd like to introduce my family, he said seriously in front of the entire staff. He pulled Venus close. This is Venus, my wife, he added. Venus was stunned by the term he used, but before she could react, she was surrounded by congratulations. And of course you all know my son, Kyle, Zane continued, placing his hand on Kyle's shoulder. Kyle smiled shyly and waved. The staff applauded, some swooning, others speechless. This was huge news for Zane's fans. Many would be shocked to learn he had a wife and child. The once elusive gentleman had a family after all. No wonder Kyle sings so well. He got it from his parents, one famous singer present remarked. I can't believe you already have a wife and kid, Mr. Anderson. A lot of women will be crying over this, another added with a laugh. Meanwhile, Venus still couldn't believe everything happening around her. From a quiet, complicated life, she was now officially part of Zane's world. She held his hand and whispered, Thank you for everything. Zane smiled and kissed her forehead. This is just the beginning, my love. It's not enough. I'll introduce you to the whole world. Later, Venus quietly approached Zane's housekeeper. Inside Zane's large home, she noticed something missing. No family pictures. Ma'am, where are Zane's parents? She asked, slightly hesitant. The housekeeper was momentarily surprised, not expecting the question. She sighed and answered carefully. Sir Zane's parents passed away a long time ago, Ma'am Venus. Venus froze. What do you mean? They've been gone for years. Since then, Sir Zane has been alone, until now, because you and Kyle are here, the housekeeper said, eyes full of sorrow. Venus's heart sank. She hadn't expected that of all the people unaware of Zane's past. She herself had no idea he had experienced such deep loneliness. After a long day at work, Zane and Venus lay side by side, exhausted but comforted by each other's presence. Suddenly, Venus asked while nestled in Zane's arms, Zane, is it true your parents are gone? Zane stiffened. Where did you hear that? He asked, his voice quiet and tinged with sadness. Your housekeeper told me. Why didn't you tell me? Venus asked softly. She realized that she wasn't the only one who had struggled in the past. Zane had too. Zane took a deep breath and closed his eyes, as if swallowing a heavy weight in his chest. It was hard to talk about before, but now I'm ready to tell you everything. I don't want to hide anything from you anymore, he said quietly. Venus tightened her hug around Zane, silently promising she would stay and listen. That night, Zane finally told her the story of losing his parents. He recalled his time in America, the joy of graduation day. The air was filled with laughter, students in gowns hugging their families, holding diplomas with pride. But in one corner stood a young man in a black toga, a medal hanging from his neck, trembling hands clutching his diploma. Zane. It should have been one of the happiest days of his life. He had achieved his dream. But it felt empty. There were no parents to embrace him, no mother's voice saying, Son, we're so proud of you. No father's laughter reminding him of his bright future. They were both gone. A few days before graduation, Zane's mother passed away. Her illness had worsened just before he left for America. He never imagined it would end so quickly. One night, his father called. Son, come home. Your mother's gone. Zane's entire body trembled. His chest tightened. It was as if he couldn't breathe. But I thought she was recovering in the hospital, he cried. Her body couldn't take it anymore. She didn't make it, his father replied, sobbing on the other end. Zane collapsed on the apartment floor, phone in hand, staring blankly into space. All he had thought of was finishing school and returning home to show his success to his mother. But how could he now? She was gone. Months later, his father followed, not due to illness, but heartbreak. His father had stopped eating, living each day as if waiting to join his wife. The day finally came. Zane received another call. Sir, your father's gone, the family doctor said. Zane was speechless. He trembled, tears falling without him realizing. The two most important people in his life were gone, without him ever seeing them one last time. Why? Why did this happen? Why do I have to lose the people I love? He had asked himself. He had left Venus to chase a dream, and in return, he lost his parents. What was the point of success if those he loved most weren't there to share it? He didn't go to the celebration with the other students. He returned to his apartment, sat on the bed, and broke down. That whole day he'd been on stage with a medal and diploma. But that night, he cried alone under the city lights of a place that would never feel like home. He returned to the present, still in Venus's embrace, eyes staring into nothing, reliving the pain. I never even got to hug them before they left. I still carry that pain, Venus, he said quietly. Venus caressed his cheek and let his tears fall freely. You're not alone, Zane. I'm here. Kyle's here. You don't have to face everything alone anymore, she whispered. Zane hugged her tightly. For the first time in years, he didn't feel completely lost, because with Venus and Kyle, he had a family again. Zane and Venus sat quietly in the audience of a famous singing competition for kids, The Voice Kids. This was Kyle's first time performing on national television. Zane's eyes sparkled with pride and excitement as he watched his son take the stage, holding the microphone, dressed in a smart little suit, and beaming with confidence. When Kyle finished his song, the entire studio erupted in applause. The crowd stood, cheering loudly, while the judges looked at each other in awe of the boy's talent. Zane clapped joyfully. "That's our son," he said aloud. Venus couldn't help but smile beside him. Kyle quickly ran down the stage and into his parents' arms. Venus hugged him tightly, her hand gently rubbing his back. "You were amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you," Venus said with joy in her voice. "I'm happy I got to sing my song on a big stage. That was for you, Mom, and for you, Dad," Kyle said cheerfully. "You know, Kyle, you've got a long way to go," Zane said. "What's important is that you keep enjoying what you do and never stop singing from your heart." "Your dad is right," Venus added. "No matter what happens, we'll always be here to support you." Kyle hugged them both again, overwhelmed with happiness. Venus and Zane felt the same deep emotion in that moment. On their way home, Zane and Venus stayed quiet in the car. Neither of them mentioned Kyle's birthday. Kyle, sitting in the back seat, started to feel a little sad. He wondered if maybe his parents had forgotten about it. Maybe with everything going on, his performances and everything else, they hadn't remembered. Zane noticed the change in Kyle's demeanor. He glanced in the rearview mirror and asked, "Kyle, why do you look sad? Weren't you happy with your performance earlier?" "I was," Kyle replied quietly. "But?" Venus asked, trying not to smile. "Nothing," Kyle said, turning his face away and trying to hide the sadness in his voice. When they arrived home, the living room was dark, only a few lights on, making it seem like just another ordinary night. Kyle furrowed his brow, about to say something, when suddenly, "Surprise!" The whole house lit up, revealing a giant birthday banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Kyle." Confetti burst in the air, balloons floated all around, and a large birthday cake with candles sat on the table. Some of the studio staff were there, along with a few of Kyle's new friends from the music industry. Kyle's mouth dropped open in shock and joy. He could hardly believe it. I thought you forgot," Kyle said softly, eyes welling up. Zane knelt in front of him and placed his hands on Kyle's shoulders. "Son, how could we ever forget such a special day? You're the greatest gift your mom and I have ever received." Venus stepped closer, brushing Kyle's hair affectionately. "You don't ever have to worry. For the rest of our lives, we'll celebrate every milestone and special moment with you. Happy birthday, Kyle." Kyle broke into tears of happiness as he hugged both his parents tightly. "Thank you. I love you so much," he sobbed in their arms. Zane gently rubbed Kyle's back. "We love you too, son. Always remember that." As Kyle held onto his parents, the whole room was filled with smiles and laughter. That night, joy had no limits. The house rang with laughter and happiness as Zane, Venus, and Kyle celebrated with the house staff and friends who helped pull off the surprise. They were surrounded by delicious food, and Kyle's face glowed with excitement. "This is the happiest birthday ever, Mom, Dad," Kyle said as he happily ate cake. "You deserve it, sweetheart. You've been so good and hard-working," Venus said, ruffling his hair. As everyone was enjoying the moment, Zane suddenly stood up. Venus and the others turned to look at him, surprised. In the middle of the celebration, Zane walked over to Venus. He pulled out a small box from his pocket and slowly knelt in front of her. Venus gasped, unable to believe what she was seeing. the room filled with excited squeals and cheers from the staff and friends from the music studio who had come for the party. The engagement ring in Zane's hand sparkled under the chandelier light. His hand trembled slightly as he looked into Venus's eyes, but his heart was certain. "Venus," Zane began, "I've been preparing for this day for years. Even when I was still studying in America, I kept imagining how I'd propose to you, where we'd get married, and how I'd make sure you lived a happy life." Tears welled up in Venus's eyes. "I know we've been through so much. We spent so many years apart. There were so many times I failed to give you and Kyle what you both deserved. But now, I want to make it right," Zane said. He took a deep breath and continued. "Venus, you're the only woman I want to spend the rest of my life with, the only woman I want to call my wife, the only woman I want to be the mother of our children." Venus could hardly breathe, overwhelmed by the emotion. "So I want to ask you," Zane's voice shook with nerves and excitement, "will you marry me? Will you give me a second chance to make everything right?" A moment of silence passed before Venus, tears streaming down her cheeks, nodded. "Yes, Zane. You're the only man I've ever loved, and I'll love you until I grow old," she answered, drawing cheers from the crowd. Zane quickly slipped the ring onto her finger. The room erupted in applause and celebration. "Congratulations, Mrs. Anderson and Mr. Zane," shouted the staff, friends, and well-wishers. Kyle jumped for joy, clapping with sparkling eyes. "Yay!" he cheered, his voice full of excitement and laughter. Venus didn't waste a moment. She hugged Zane tightly, feeling the warmth and love from the man she had always loved. Their lips met in a deep, emotional kiss, a kiss filled with promises and unconditional love. At last, nothing stood in their way. And finally, Kyle's longtime dream had come true, to have a complete family. Zane couldn't keep still, pacing in front of the altar. He bit his lip, eyes flicking toward the large church doors. Venus was 5 minutes late, but to him, it felt like 5 years. What if she changed her mind? He dadded under his breath, a little louder than he realized. Willie, his best friend and best man, chuckled and grabbed him by the shoulders. "Bro, calm down. You're gonna faint before the ceremony starts. She's coming." "But what if she doesn't? What if she realized she doesn't really love me?" Zane said, stopping mid-thought. Willie rolled his eyes and shook Zane gently. "Stop it. You've got to cut back on the coffee, man. You're too jittery, and your thoughts are all over the place." Guests nearby overheard and laughed. Someone even shouted, "Calm down, Zane," making the whole church chuckle. Suddenly, the doors opened and the wedding march began to play. Everyone turned. Venus appeared at the end of the aisle, bathed in light streaming through the windows. Her white gown flowed elegantly, her long, wavy hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked like a vision, an angel descending from heaven. Kyle stood to the side, grinning as he watched his mom. He was the flower boy, and noticing how frozen his dad was, he leaned over to Willie and whispered, "Uncle, why does Dad look like he's about to cry?" Willie laughed and patted Kyle's head. "That's what happens when someone's overflowing with love. Your dad's just really, really happy." When Venus reached the altar, Zane couldn't help himself. He immediately took her hand and pulled her into a tight hug. "I thought you weren't coming," he whispered, voice trembling. Venus laughed and stroked his back. "Zane, you're always so nervous. I just got stuck in traffic." Zane wiped his eyes and smiled. "I almost passed out from worry. I thought you were going to leave me again." Before he could finish, he cupped her face and kissed her. The priest's loud cough echoed through the church. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Venus shook her head, grinning. "Zane, not yet. The ceremony hasn't even started," the priest said, his voice half amused, half scolding. More laughter followed as Zane scratched his head, clearly embarrassed. "Sorry, Father, I couldn't help it," he mumbled, prompting another round of chuckles from the guests. Venus leaned in and whispered to him, "Don't worry. The wedding's happening, and later you won't have to hold back anymore." At her words, Zane almost jumped from joy. Kyle, watching his parents, could hardly contain his excitement. A few months after the wedding, Zane and Venus moved into their dream house, a wide, elegant home with a view of the mountains and a lake. It was the same place they had dreamed of when they were young, and now it was finally theirs, with Kyle by their side. One morning, Venus surprised Zane while he sat on the porch. She quietly approached, holding a small box, and placed it on his lap. "What's this?" Zane asked, glancing up at her. "Open it," Venus said with a bright smile and sparkling eyes. Zane opened the box slowly. Inside were two tiny pairs of baby shoes. He stared at them for a few seconds, trying to understand. Then his eyes widened. "Don't tell me," he started to say, but Venus nodded. "Yes, I'm pregnant. We're going to have another baby," she said joyfully. Zane nearly fell out of his chair from shock. He shouted with glee, then immediately pulled Venus into a tight hug, almost lifting her off the ground. "I've waited so long for this. We're having another baby. No, twins," he said, his hands already cradling her belly. Venus laughed, glowing with happiness. "Yes, twins, Zane." But soon after the excitement, Zane became overly protective. One time, Venus was in the kitchen, frying eggs, when he appeared out of nowhere and gently pulled her away from the stove. "Zane, it's just eggs, nothing dangerous," Venus protested, but he insisted she sit at the table. "No excuses, I'll do the cooking. I don't want you breathing smoke or slipping," Zane replied, serious as ever. Venus and Kyle exchanged amused glances while Zane busied himself with breakfast. Venus couldn't help but tease him. She hugged him from behind. "You're really sweet when you're like this. I feel like a queen," she said. "You are a queen, Venus, and you deserve to be spoiled," he replied, kissing her on the forehead. From then on, Zane hardly left the house. He told his management he would be working from home, so he could personally take care of Venus and their baby. As Venus's belly grew, Zane's protectiveness only intensified. One day, while Zane worked on his laptop, Venus crawled into his lap. "You haven't left your laptop. I miss you," she murmured, running her fingers along his neck. Zane smiled and wrapped his arm around her waist. "I'm always watching over you. I'm not going anywhere." Their eyes met, and slowly, their lips touched in a warm, passionate kiss. Their arms wrapped around each other tighter as they forgot everything else, until a knock on the door interrupted them. "Mom, someone's here to see you," Kyle called from outside the room. Venus and Zane froze. She chuckled while Zane groaned and rubbed his forehead in frustration. "Kyle, tell them to wait. We're busy," Zane said. "But Miss Lucy said it's important," Kyle insisted. Zane sighed and turned to Venus. "There's always something, huh?" Venus smiled and stroked his cheek. "Make it up to me after I give birth, okay?" Zane grinned, stealing one last kiss before she stood up. "I'm counting on that." As they went downstairs, they were stunned to find two unexpected visitors, Venus's parents. Venus froze, her body going cold. It had been years since she last saw them. Now they stood in front of her, eyes filled with regret and sadness. She slowly stepped forward. "How did you find me?" she asked softly. Her mother didn't answer. Tears spilled from her eyes as she pulled Venus into a tight embrace. "My child," she said over and over, voice trembling, arms refusing to let go. Venus was caught off guard. She never expected that kind of embrace from her mother. "We've been looking for you for so long," her mother sobbed. "Since you left, not a day passed that I didn't regret pushing you away. I should never have done that." Venus turned to her father, seeing tears forming in his eyes too. "We've searched for you all these years but couldn't find you," he said quietly. "This year, we saw you on TV with Zane and Kyle. That's when we knew where to look." "We didn't hesitate. Even if you can't forgive us, we just want the chance to make things right," her mother added. Venus couldn't stop her tears. She had always thought they gave up on her, that they had moved on without her. But now they were here, asking for forgiveness and longing to reconnect. She slowly reached out and held her mother's hand. "I forgave you a long time ago, Mom. I was just scared. I didn't know if you'd accept me again. I was afraid of being hurt," she said. "Please forgive us. We don't know how to make up for it, but we'll do anything to show you how sorry we are," her mother cried. Venus finally hugged both her parents. The three of them wept together while Zane and Kyle stood nearby, quietly watching. Zane stepped forward, gently touched Venus's back, and turned to her parents. "Thank you," he said softly. "I know it hasn't been easy for Venus, but I'm happy to see her with you again." Venus's mother approached Zane and held his hand. "Zane, thank you. We know it wasn't easy for you either, but you found her, and you stayed. We're sorry for the anger we had back then. I was just so upset when I found out she was pregnant." "I love my family," Zane said, "and I'll do everything to make Venus happy. You don't need to worry anymore." Suddenly, Kyle ran toward them and hugged his grandparents. They laughed and hugged him back. "You've grown so big, Kyle," his grandmother exclaimed. That night, Venus felt peace in her heart. For the first time in a long while, her family was whole, with Zane, Kyle, and now her parents. That night, she realized something. True forgiveness isn't just about giving someone else a second chance. It's about giving yourself one too. 6 months had passed, and Venus's belly had grown significantly. Carrying twins made it harder for her to move, and worry was written all over Zane's face as he closely watched over her. "Are you sure you're okay?" Zane asked gently as he rubbed her back while she rested on the sofa. "I'm fine, love. What matters is that our babies are safe when I finally give birth," Venus answered, her hand tenderly resting on her belly. No matter how many times Venus reassured him, Zane couldn't hide his concern. Kyle sat close, laying his head on his mother's belly, whispering softly. "Babies, please be safe with Mom when you come out, okay?" Venus smiled and stroked Kyle's hair. "They will be, and I know you're excited to meet your siblings." As if on cue, a sudden kick from inside Venus's belly made Kyle jump. "They're so active," he said, laughing. "They're just like you, Dad," Venus teased Zane. "Why do you always get the blame?" Zane raised an eyebrow, amused. "Why is it always my fault?" he replied, clearly enjoying the exchange. But in the middle of their playful banter, Venus's eyes widened as she felt warm liquid soaking through her clothes. At the same time, a sharp pain surged through her abdomen. "Zane, it's time. I think I'm going into labor." Zane froze, staring at her in shock. "Zane!" Venus called out again. His mouth dropped open. He didn't move until Kyle tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, what's happening to Mom?" Only then did Zane snap back to reality. Venus looked at him as if to say, "Do something." But instead of panicking, she laughed through the pain. "Relax, love. I'm the one giving birth here, but you're the one freaking out," she said between gasps. "Yeah, Dad, you're supposed to stay calm, but you look like the one about to give birth," Kyle added with a chuckle. Zane remained in a daze. "Okay, bag, hospital, car, breathe, I've got this." He rushed to their room to grab Venus's hospital bag, but stopped midway down the stairs, realizing he'd forgotten where it was. "Love, where's the bag?" he shouted. "It's right beside you," Venus replied, trying not to laugh at his panic. Kyle handed the bag to his dad. "Focus, Dad." Zane was drenched in sweat as he helped Venus to the car. Venus winced with each step, but couldn't help but laugh at her overly stressed husband. Kyle followed closely, excitement all over his face. "Faster, Dad," Kyle said, bouncing with energy. Zane revved the car and nearly slammed the garage door in his hurry. "Just breathe, love. Breathe. I'm here. Don't worry," Zane kept repeating. "Zane, you're the one who needs to breathe. And slow down. We don't want to get into an accident before we even make it to the hospital," Venus said, groaning from the pain. In his nervous state, Zane stepped too hard on the gas, causing the car to jerk backward. "We're supposed to go forward, not reverse," Kyle shouted. "Right. Too much on my mind," Zane muttered, trying to refocus. As the car sped toward the hospital, Venus and Kyle exchanged glances, sighing in unison. "Dad acts like it's his first time having a baby," Venus said with a laugh. Kyle giggled beside her. Inside the hospital, Zane, Venus, and Kyle arrived. Venus had already been in the delivery room for an hour. Each minute that passed made Zane more anxious. He paced back and forth outside the door, constantly questioning the nurse nearby. "Are you sure everything will be okay? No complications? Nothing bad will happen to my wife or babies?" he asked in rapid succession, voice trembling. The nurse sighed but smiled gently. "Sir, please try not to worry. Everything will be fine. Your wife and babies are healthy." Zane let out a deep breath, though the anxiety in his chest didn't fully disappear. Meanwhile, Kyle knelt beside a chair, eyes closed in deep prayer. "Lord, please keep Mom and my baby siblings safe. I hope they don't get hurt too much. I can't wait to meet them." Suddenly, the delivery room doors swung open. Zane rushed to the doctor. "Doctor, how are they?" he asked breathlessly. The doctor smiled and nodded. "They're fine. You can come in now." A wave of relief washed over Zane as he rushed into the room, Kyle trailing behind. He saw Venus lying in bed, her face tired but glowing with a soft smile. Zane broke into tears as he approached, seeing the two tiny bundles nestled beside her. He hugged Venus tightly. "Love, I was so scared. I know that was painful. Thank you for being strong," Zane said. Venus stroked his cheek, and he kissed her forehead. The doctor returned, smiling warmly. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. You have a baby girl and a baby boy." Zane stared at the sleeping twins, hardly believing they were real. He reached for Venus's hand, filled with awe. "They're so tiny, Mom, but they're so cute," Kyle said, gently touching their tiny fingers. "I'm so excited to be a big brother." Zane couldn't stop smiling as he watched his son. Not long after, the nurses brought the twins closer so Zane and Venus could hold them before they were taken to the nursery. Zane cradled their baby girl, hearing her faint but clear cry. His tears fell again. This was his family now. He touched the baby's tiny forehead and kissed it. Then he turned to Venus and Kyle, wrapping them in his arms, and whispered, full of emotion, "Thank you for giving me a second chance at having a family. You are my dream come true." Venus and Kyle embraced him back, and in that moment, they knew a new chapter of their lives had begun with their new little angels. The story of Zane and Venus was one of emotion, sacrifice, and triumph, a reminder that in life you must believe in your dreams, even when the choices you make for them are painful, because when love is real, no matter how far you drift apart, you'll still find your way back to each other at the right time. They also learned that trust is key to any relationship, like Venus, who let Zane chase his dream even if it meant they'd be separated. And more than anything, love isn't just a word. It's a promise to stay together for life. A deeply moving reminder that even if you've lost your home or your family, there's always room in your heart for forgiveness, understanding, and reconciliation. And with that, the love story of Zane and Venus comes to an end. Thank you so much to everyone who never stopped following along, and shout out to all our loyal listeners. Thanks for listening, and God bless everyone. My name is Mr. Hope. I believe you've learned something new from this extraordinary story. If yes, drop me a comment. Thanks, and I'll see you later tonight.